My name is Chase Bettis. I worked with Rayonier this summer out of their Greater Georgia Resource Unit. I was stationed in their Dublin office, but I also traveled back and forth to their Manor office, which is down near Waycross. So I was doing a decent amount of commuting. A little background on the company. They were founded in 1926 in Olympic Peninsula in Shelton, Washington. Originally, they produced a superior grade of bleached paper pulp, and since then have undergone many changes over the past 89 years that they've been in business. Recently, a big change to their company is that they split from their fibers business in 2014. That company is now known as Rayonier Advanced Materials. Even though they share the name Rayonier, they are no longer tied to completely different companies. But Rayonier, the one I worked for, the company is now operating as a real estate investment trust, or a REIT, where their goal is to increase timberland holdings while upgrading the quality by evaluating every acre, divesting non-strategic timberlands, and reinvesting in strategic timberlands. My goals and objectives for the summer, they went to every branch in the company, in the office that I was working at. They wanted to give me a lot of exposure to different fields. So they went to the timber marketing team, the land management team, the research team, and the added value team to come up with a list of projects for me to try and complete over the summer. They had a long list, but I didn't get to all of them. But here's some of the ones that I did get to. I was to identify 2015 woody release treatment candidate stands for the Manor Greater Georgia Resource Unit. I also identified thinning candidate stands for the Dublin and Manor office. There was a project where I had to reevaluate tracts in a 7,200 acre purchase in the Chattahoochee Forest. I reevaluated for new site index and updating the plantability listings. I also identified disease stands that were already planned for woody release, and I identified merciable legacy stranded stands and developed a plan to access that stranded wood. My daily tasks and assignments, I work from 8 until 5 every day. A lot of days I work past 5. I got to use their LMS system pretty regularly, which is their version of ArcGIS. It's where they have all of their land information. And I posted my projects and changes to their data at the end of each project. And I also use that system to run queries to select the sites that I would need to visit for each project. I was on the road, like I said, for most of the internship, so my daily schedule varied from project to project. It just kind of depended on what they had me doing. But I'll kind of run you through on some of the stuff that I did. For that 2015 woody release candidate project, I evaluated stands in 74 different compartments down in the Manor office. In that project, I drove from compartment to compartment, and they told me I didn't have to sample every stand, just get enough to kind of make an estimate of whether they would be good for woody release or not. And so for that, I got out and took a couple plots, and what I did, I had a 14-foot collapsible pole that I placed next to the tree to kind of get a visual estimate of heights and crown ratios. And the reason it was 14 feet was because they didn't want the sprayer on the tractor to spray too much of the crown, and that was the height of the boom or the sprayer on the tractor. And so if there was a third or less than a third of the crown that was below 14 foot, that was acceptable. I also looked for understory competition, form issues, and disease like pitch canker. Pitch canker is a pretty big problem down there. And then I posted all of my changes and updates to the LMS system at the end of that project. For the thinning candidate project, I did one in Dublin and in Manor. They had me do it differently each time. And in the Dublin office, I visited every stand selected by the query. And those were stands that were in the 03 and 04 planting class. Let's see, I measured merciable height of trees in each plot, crown length of the dominant trees, and number of trees in per plot using a BAF 10 prism. And I also checked for pore form and disease, as well as species of interest. If the trees had a mergeable height between 20 and 30, I marked them as either maybe or yes, depending on the compartment or the stand and what it looked like overall. And if the crowns for loblolly pine needed to be at least 15 feet, and the crowns for slash pine needed to be at least 20 feet in order to respond well to thinning. And for the Manor office, they had me do one plot per 50 acres just to check, and I used a laser height finder to find average mergeable height, and I used a 20-foot pole to get trees per plot, multiplied that by 35 because that's a 20th acre plot. And I also checked for form, rust, other diseases, and the acceptable rate for rust and forking and stuff like that. They didn't want anything greater than 30% on the stand. And the reevaluation project in the Chattahoochee Forest, that was an interesting track, or an interesting project. Basically, I was evaluating stands that were incorrectly labeled for site index and plantability. The information that they had received from the previous owner was misleading or incorrect on a lot of these, and so they wanted an update to make sure that they could actually get a better estimation of what the land was actually worth and what it would be worth going forward into the future. So I drove from stand to stand, everyone that was listed in the compartment, got out and took site index measurements. I measured trees that they went and then plugged into a site index formula that they had in the research department. And I also, if there weren't trees to take site index heights on, I looked at surrounding stands, soil types, topography, stuff like that. And then for plantability, you're basically looking at slope and gullies and whether there's an SMZ. And a lot of those were incorrect as well, so we had to update those and post those to the LMS system. The disease stands that were already planned for woody release in Manor, those were already in LMS before I got there. I made a list, and they wanted me to go back and check to make sure that they were all right to spray if there was to make sure that there wasn't too much pitch canker that would inhibit them from spraying. And so I pretty much just drove, the heights and all those were fine, so I drove from stand to stand and kind of got a visual cue of whether it was infested with pitch canker, which is pretty easy to tell because a lot of times it'll manifest on the side of the road and you can see the tops of the trees dying. And you can, if it was bad, I'd get out and walk in the stand and get an idea of what it looked like also in the stand. And then the stranded mergeable legacy stands, I ran a query on LMS that chose stands that were 28 years old or greater, and they had to be at least 10 acres in size. I then exported that query to Excel and sorted it in Excel to 3 different categories: conifer free to schedule, hardwood free to schedule, and mixed free to schedule. I then took that Excel file and went through LMS and looked at all of their images and aerial photos to see if they were actually stranded. And if they were stranded, I highlighted them and made a field visit later on to go visit that stand and then try and find a way to access that stand by creating a road system or accessing it through adjacent properties or whatever needed to be done to get to that wood.
What's the free schedule?
Nothing had been planned for it. No timber sales, nothing like that, release or anything. The contributions, they asked what our contributions were to the company. A lot of these were projects that they would be doing themselves if I hadn't been there. So I saved them time in the field and allowed them to get ahead on other projects and harvest scheduling and stuff like that. It was pretty cool because, like I said, it was stuff that they would be doing. So they gave me not just a bunch of grunt work. I got to do some pretty cool projects. And since I was in the field for almost my entire internship, I was able to provide information on certain stands and how they were looking, and if they had a question about, what if there was a gate or a lock or something, I could give them some information on what they needed. And I'm sure like everybody that had an internship, you try to be flexible and do everything with a positive attitude, and so that's what I try to contribute. to the work environment this summer. And Warnell's influence that I had, that Warnell's influence on my internship, I learned a lot in silviculture that past semester, and that helped me with the land management side because a lot of the projects that I was doing had to do with land management. Forest econ and timber management also made me more comfortable with financial concepts and projects with the timber marketing team with timber sales and things like that. And then I also had the forestry field camp right before my internship started. And so that made me feel a lot more confident going into a position where I'd be doing pretty much everything that we covered in field camp. So it was a great refresher and kind of made me feel more confident going into the industry. And with that, I got some of the information from Rayonier from there.